Gonna try. Okay, here we go. Gotta figure out how to do. I have two screens, so start here. Is that working?
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. I'm starting with the thrift store because I just recently moved to Menominee Falls area, so been so busy I haven't really had a chance to go around. So I actually really like this project. Um, but yeah, I found a thrift store and the owner was like super awesome there. I actually found a couple things there, a couple fishing lures and some like dress shoes for $3, which was pretty awesome. What else is cool?
Ooh,
These are
I
kind
was
of
gonna say dress shoes for $3. Like that's quite the find. So that's nice.
yeah. Oh, and then this, I guess I can talk about this because I was trying to find like the community outreach health clinic and it said permanently closed and it like took me to the hospital. So I guess that's kind of otherwise you have to drive to like Milwaukee. If so, I don't know if that's kind of a problem. So I learned about that. So that was interesting.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, very interesting that seems that there are no more community health centers, which that is not great.
Yeah, of
But thank you for sharing, Brady. I appreciate it. Uh,
course.
hmm,
I said, of course.
thank you. And then if you guys have any questions or comments for Brady, drop them in the chat. All right. Next, I will call on drum roll, please. It looks like it's Tori's turn.
Hello. Let me pull mine up. Okay. Okay. Man. So I guess a fun one, or one that I thought was interesting, was the community activities and resources. I took a wild guess guessing that this kind of stuff was at the community center, and I'm very happy when I walked in. There was a big wall of a ton of different things. I thought it was cool that they had things ranging from concerts to rummage sales, and then on here, like Parkinson's support group, hospice care groups. It was really interesting to see all these. And another one I have, oh, here's Colin and I. We're at the park by my parents' house. It was fun. Just a typical park that you see. There's nothing really too much to it. I included that the playground wasn't inclusive, but other than that, it was a great walk and a great day.
Awesome. Great pictures. I love to see what you learned. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you to Colin for participating. I almost said Pollen because I was trying to say Colin and participating at the same time. Thank you. And then last, we'll end with Teresa for today. Show us a few slides.
Yeah, hold on. Right.
We can see it too.
The first one that I will choose to do was the Milwaukee Public Library, the East Branch. I learned that you can rent out or check out Chrome computers, which I think is really cool. You can use it for 21 days. And even people who don't have a library card can check them out too. They can just use their IDs instead. So I thought that was cool. Milwaukee, and then I also took a few selfies in Chicago as well. My parents live right by Oz Park, so I took a selfie there. And I just think Oz Park is super cute. It has a bunch of the Wizard of Oz characters all around. It has a bunch of gardens, tennis courts, basketball courts, things like that. So I think it just has a lot to offer. And it's super cute if anyone hasn't gone.
I just learned two very new things. So that's so cool. The information about the library being able to check out a Chromebook for 21 days, that is that's a game changer for sure. So like that's awesome. Who in general, and this is a question for the whole group, not just for you, if you, who is a client, for example, that you would tell about that resource, about being able to get a laptop for 21 days? What are some things that could promote for us? Yeah, what's up? Is that Emma?
I was gonna say a job application. You could go online and, or like SNAP programs or any of those, taxes.
Yes, someone looking for a job, students, someone who's trying to apply for benefits, all of those things. That would be really nice for them to know they could get a laptop. Also, it also promotes leisure. So there are a lot of people, whether they're in the community or if they're trying to transition out into the community, that just kind of don't have access to technology to be able to do things like watch YouTube videos and stream. So that's always important to remember. Just in general with the community, we talk a lot about trying to help people, which obviously is very important, but we also want to make sure that we're attending to their leisure needs, which it'd be just kind of nice to have access to a laptop. So that's really cool. Thank you. And I also didn't know about Oz Park, so I will go visit since I'm here in Chicago. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone who shared today. I will kind of I'll do that for the next few classes. Just call on a couple of you because your scavenger hunts look great. I'm really happy for y'all. Yes, Emma.
Just to clarify, are we supposed to have one bullet point per slide or one bullet point total?
It's one bullet point per slide.
Okay, sounds good.
And I just tell me one thing that you learned about that resource. All right, thank you for your question. I always love questions. All right, so let's get into today's lecture. Let me go ahead and pull that up. That's if I can figure out, where would I have put this lecture? Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, ooh. 1 second, y'all. Phoenix. Okay, so this week our unit is about advocacy. And so I decided, instead of just teaching you all theories of advocacy and models of advocacy and we would just actually talk about what advocacy looks like in a form of advocacy. So this is a presentation that I put together and is part of some work that I'm doing with Diverse OT National, which, as you guys know, is my organization. And then there is another group called Diverse OT that is based here in Chicago. And they're called Diverse OT Collective. Definitely look them up on Instagram. They're pretty cool. And they're a Latina-led OT collective that really works towards doing some advocacy work. They're very active in our communities in Chicago. They just got done hosting a stellar hand therapy week, actively do community service, and predominantly serve the Latino, Black, and low SES communities here in Chicago. So we've been teaming up to kind of talk about what is going on in Florida in with all of the kind of anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ, anti-women, anti-children, anti-immigrant, anti-Black laws and bills that are being supported and passed in Florida, and how it impacts occupational freedom, and how it also just kind of impacts our profession. Because as you know, AOTA Inspire 2024 is planned to be in Florida next year. So our learning objectives for today are, I want you to be able, by the end of this lecture, to be able to define occupational justice, identify the types of occupational injustice that are present with these laws, explain how current Florida laws impact occupational functioning for various populations, and then identify 2 to 3 ways to participate in the dismantling of systemic barriers to occupational participation. 1 second. Okay. So I just kind of wanted to go over the community agreements today, because obviously this conversation is going to be very political. I also want to make a disclaimer that obviously I'm against what Ron DeSantis is doing. So that's my political position on this, because I want you all to be aware of my own biases. And I also want us to just be able to engage in a thoughtful discussion. We don't all have to agree with what I'm saying, but we should be able to all listen to one another. So as a reminder, our community agreements are to speak from the I perspective, to listen actively, to step up, step back. So if you're someone who speaks a lot, maybe fall back on this one. And if you're someone who you don't usually lend your voice to these conversations, go ahead and speak up. But in general, I really do want to hear from all of you. I do want to hear everyone's opinions, because, even though these are challenging conversations, this is how we learn, is by having tough discussions. That we should respect silence. So silence can be an indication of thought and process. So we're going to give everyone time to be able to talk. I would love for you all to share, even if you don't have the words, and that we won't judge one another as we're trying to say what we feel or what we think. The next is to uphold confidentiality. So treat the honesty of others as a gift. Assume that personal identities, experiences, and perspectives shared in this space are confidential. And then the last is to lean into discomfort. So learning happens on the edge of our comfort zones. Push yourself to be open to new ideas and experiences, even if they initially seem uncomfortable to you. As always, this is an anti-racist learning space, so there will be zero tolerance policy for racism, sexism, classism, ableism, transphobia, homophobia, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and hate speech or actions that attempt to silence and threaten or degrade others. In our learning space, we'll continue to uphold the community agreements and engage in mutual respect. And we're just going to respect all lived experiences and viewpoints, respect different ways of knowing, and respect different styles for presenting. So can I get a thumbs up if this is cool with you? Cool, 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 cool. Awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm seeing thumbs, I'm seeing thumbs. Okay, cool. I appreciate it so much. Also, I would like to say, just speaking to lived experiences, there are obviously Black people in this learning space. There are queer people in this learning space. There are trans people in this learning space. There are people who who have parents who are immigrants, are immigrants themselves in this learning space. So first of all, I want to acknowledge all of those identities that are here with us, okay? And so if you ever need a break, or if you need, this is a lot, it's overwhelming to you, go ahead and just take a break. You can mute me. That is okay. I'm not here to cause any type of distress in anyone. And I also want to acknowledge, make sure that we all just keep that in mind as we're embarking on this conversation of just being sensitive to those that are impacted, and just in general, it's always nice to be empathetic. Yeah. So, and if at any time you need anything from me, please, you're able to private message me on on this chat, and you can also email me, okay? Because I want to do this as safely as possible. All right, so let's get into it. So what is going on in Florida? So Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party have passed a series of laws that negatively impact LGBTQ plus people, Black people, Latinx people, people from low SES backgrounds, immigrant communities, DACA recipients, children, and women. The laws are so severe that both the NAACP and the LULAC have issued travel advisories to Florida, saying it is unsafe for Black populations and Latino people to be in Florida or travel to Florida just due to the severity of the laws. I believe a travel advisory was also issued by Equality Florida, telling LGBTQ people that it is really not safe to be in Florida right now. I think that's, yeah, Equality Florida. So how does this relate to occupational justice, right? What does Florida have to do with occupational justice? What does it have to do with these concepts that we talk about so much in OT school? Well, the thing is that Hawking defines occupational justice as a concept that is concerned with enabling, meditating, and advocating for environments in which all people's opportunities to engage in occupation are just, health promoting, and meaningful. And there are three foundational concepts to occupational justice, according to Hawking. The first is that humans are inherently occupational beings. So this just means that the things people do are a determinant of health. This implies that occupational justice is only served when conditions allow people to engage in occupations in ways that are consistent with their culture and beliefs. Additionally, occupational justice has an inclusive agenda. So it really specifies that people are appropriately supported to participate in occupation, right? And our occupations are all the things we do. So that's all the things from going out to the club and having fun, working a job, taking care of your kids, all the way down to being able to use the bathroom in peace, right? Being able to use the bathroom is an occupation. These things are all occupations. So the second thing we know about occupational justice is occupation is contextually embedded. So let's pause here and talk about context. What are the different contexts that we consider in OT? So when we're saying we need to look at the environment or look at the context, what are those different contexts? Okay, I believe we went over this last week, but that is okay. We'll go over it again. I will tell you guys what contexts are. Let me just pull it up so you guys can see what I'm doing. Yeah, there we go. The physical context, the social, there we go. Culture, that is the context that we're talking about in the view. Thank you, Sure. In an occupation, from an occupational therapy standpoint. So we want to look at the physical environment. We want to look at the social environment. We want to look at the cultural environment. These are also known as contexts. These are the things that we want to be looking at. So another one of these contexts that we are looking at, so cultural, social, physical, temporal, We also want to look at the political context. These are all contexts. So the specific to the person within the environment, these are the different contexts that we look at a person. So for example, if I am looking to work with an unhoused person, right? I did a lot in community work. So if I'm looking at this client and they're having difficulty with money management, right? I have to look at their physical environment. Okay, well, they're spending a lot of money on trying to buy things that keep them safe out on the street, right? That is a context in which I can view this money management issue through, which is their physical environment. Like, oh, I can see why you're spending so much money. This is what you're trying to keep yourself safe from. I can also look through my client through a political context. I could say, well, of course you're having difficulty managing your money. You receive Social Security disability income, and that is a fixed income of $600 a month, and that is determined by the government. So that is another context that I have to look at them through, like, oh, okay, well, this is the government saying this is how much money you get. I have to look at them through a social context. And that can be things such as, oh, okay, it is important for you to continue to live in this environment because all of the other people here who live in this encampment, they are your support system. So I probably, even if you are moving into an apartment, because that's what I did, work with people to like transition them into housing. This is saying, okay, even if you are going to move into an apartment or if you are going to move in a group home, I know that you still need to live in this neighborhood because this homeless encampment over here, this is your social support. So that's the social context that I'm viewing my client through. I can also, on the flip side of that, I can view the social context of there's a lot of stigma against unhoused people, right? So then that could be something that I think about when I'm thinking about this client, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to help them manage and move and things like that. So do we get how context relates to working with a person? Thumbs up if that makes sense. Thumbs down if context is still not hidden for you, which is fine. I just want to make sure I'm explaining this. Okay, cool. I see seeing. Okay, all right, cool. Thanks for the thumbs up, everyone. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, awesome. And so those are the contexts that we consider. And then the last is that in relation to occupational justice, engaging in occupation can improve the lives of people in vulnerable situations. So that means if that is what we believe, then occupational justice is concerned with enabling, mediating, and advocating for environments in which all people's opportunities to engage in occupation are just, health promoting, and meaningful. So if we as occupational therapists ascribe to this theory of occupational justice and this belief of occupational justice, which is embedded in the core text of OT. And what we talk about so much in OT is occupational justice. Well, we know that if we believe in occupational justice, then we have to enable, mediate, and advocate for environments in which all people have the opportunity to engage in occupation. And it's just, health promoting, and meaningful. This is what we say as occupational therapists, that everyone has the right to. Everyone has the right to participate. Everyone has the right to do something meaningful. Everyone has this right. So then, according to Hawking, this is what occupational injustice can look like. So there's occupational deprivation, which occurs when people are excluded from occupations due to factors outside of an individual's control. So what could an example of occupational deprivation look like? Give me an example, y'all. What would deprivation look like? So it occurs when people are excluded from occupations due to factors outside of an individual's control. Yeah, you can't eat at a restaurant because there's no ramp to enter. It's not this person's fault that they use a mobility device or a wheelchair, but now they can't go eat somewhere because there's no ramp. Yeah, that's occupational deprivation. Thank you, Kinsey. Yes, the impact of redlining in Milwaukee. Say more about that, Brady. What are those thoughts?
Just like we've been kind of talking about it recently too, like lack of resources, food deserts, stuff like that.
Exactly. So food deserts, lack of resources. So redlining, for you all who don't know, redlining is kind of this practice of redistricting communities, if that makes sense. And so it's just kind of like how we got, poor inner city neighborhoods versus like thriving, not even thriving suburbs, or how if you go to a city, there's like, oh, there's the bad part of the city, and then there's the good part of the city. That is all due to get to redlining. And yeah, Milwaukee is the one of the top 5 most segregated cities in the US. So that's something where this is because of your race or because of your socioeconomic status. You get excluded from things, right? You get excluded from having a grocery store. You get excluded from having an urgent care. So you're deprived of these essential resources because of something that's out of your control, right? You can't help it if you come from a low SES background. You can't help what race you're born, and yet you're experiencing injustices based off of these facts. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion in the comments. The next is occupational imbalance. So occupational imbalance occurs when people are over, under, or unoccupied. So who do we think occupational imbalance happens to a lot? Unhoused people, exactly. And how do we think that occupational imbalance occurs, Isha?
You mean like how?
Yeah, how do you think? Yeah, in what ways are occupations imbalanced for unhoused people?
So if so much of their time and kind of just their focus is spent on survival and just maybe finding a place for that night, they're not spending any other time doing any sort of, whether it's like leisure activities or activities like going to the doctor or doing other basically they aren't able to focus on anything else. Is that kind of
Exactly.
okay?
Yeah, spending all of their time attempting to survive, no time for leisure, no time for pleasure, no time for even doing any type of formal working, no time for social relationships. It's like, oh, I've just survive. Other people who are occupationally imbalanced are prison populations. People who are incarcerated don't get to really do shit. And specifically those who are in solitary confinement. So people who are in solitary confinement spend 23 hours a day in a cell with nothing, right? So that's occupational imbalance. Imbalance can also happen similarly, like people from low SES backgrounds. You might see someone who works 2-3 jobs just to be able to afford their apartment and put food on the table. Well, if you're working 2-3 jobs to be able to afford your basics, which again is not that person's fault, it doesn't leave that much time for other things, right? It doesn't leave much time for a significant other or their kids or a relaxation, vacations, or learning something new, whatever it is that they would want to be doing, they might not be able to. And Awesome. And thank you, Alyssa, putting some good resources in the chat. I appreciate that. All right, on to occupational alienation. Alienation occurs when there is prolonged experiences of disconnectedness and isolation. So what is a way in which occupational alienation can occur? Say more about that, Erica. Let's talk more about classism.
I don't know. I just kind of feel this way at pickup at school, that like certain groups of parents are like all stuck together, whereas like blue collar individuals are together, and then like the more professionals are kind of in their own little group, and the mingling isn't happening so much. So like if there wasn't classism, people could just speak to each other on an even level. We're all human, and learn from each other, and it would be much more harmonious, and skill sharing. I don't know. That's what comes to my mind.
I hear you and I agree with you. Yeah. So this occupational alienation, especially related to class, can happen when if there is, oh, well, you're not one of us. You don't have X amount of money, so you can't be part of this, or you're priced out of this, or we're not going to talk to you because you're not as wealthy as us. Yeah, that is extremely alienating. And we see it in social opportunities, and we see it everywhere, right? So for example, to go to any of these academic conferences that we have to go to as professionals, these conferences cost $500 to register to get to the conference. It's $500 to stay in the hotel for a few days. And then it's at least $250 to $300 of, needing to be able to feed yourself, get around, do this, do that. So now you're looking at $1,300 to go to a conference. Well, if you're someone who doesn't have $1,300, do you get to go? No, exactly. And that can be isolating. So you don't get to participate in these things. And especially if people if you've ever seen any of those like fish out of water, like Netflix shows where it's like someone from a rough background go to like a private elite high school and they don't have any friends. Like, yeah, Netflix is kind of corny, like all those type of shows. I mean, I eat them up. I love them, but that's true. That's how it feels. You don't get to participate. Sydney, you said becoming a mom, and I would love to hear more about that because I agree.
Yeah, I just think for some people becoming a mom is really tough because it could be your first child and you don't really know what you're doing. So that's just exhausting, and then you don't really get time for yourself. Like you put all yourself into a child. So I just know that becoming a mom is really hard, and you just don't really have much time for yourself.
Yes. I'm glad you brought it up because I agree with you. That's number one. And two, I'm going to take one step back and look at systems, right? What does paid maternity look like here in the United States? Because if you go to some parts of Europe, you get up to a year off, right? And a short couple of months, Tori. Now, how many of the months that you get off, how much of it is paid, right? Those are two, right? So where is the paid maternity leave? Where's the paid parental leave? Yeah, where's the information about children? Where are where are environments in which mothers and children can exist without being harassed, right? You see every once in a while, there'll be a news article where someone screams at some mom because she's breastfeeding in public, which is a very normal thing to do, right? The baby has to eat, so then you give the baby food, right? But things like that, like, do we have environments that are welcoming to mothers? Not really. We have a lot of hostile environments that are hostile to mothers and children. There's what was that recent video that went viral of this man screaming at a baby because it was crying on the airplane, and like the poor mom is like, she's tired, she's exhausted, but we don't have a social environment that is welcoming to mothers, so that can be very alienating. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, no paid maternity leave, no paid, and then it also just general parental leave or paternal leave is also important, right? Because even if you're a mother who gets 12 weeks off or whatever, and it's not really off, you're recovering from a major birthing event, and if you're someone who's married or is partnered, and your partner can't get time off, then who's at home taking care of the mother, who's taking care of the baby, right? So these are all these things where it's like, oh, that's pretty messed up. Ooh, yes. Could education be an example of alienation if certain school districts offer different opportunities and access than others? Yes, it could be a form of alienation. A lot of times where we see that alienation is if you go to well, I can use myself as an example. So it's not in elementary school, but this was in university. When I went and started at UW-Madison, when I was in school, they were not teaching anything about Black populations. And so that was very alienating, right? So it's like, I'm not learning about myself at all in this education. Okay, very good, y'all. The next is marginalization. So marginalization occurs when there are invisible and informal norms and expectations that impact opportunities. So what are some examples of marginalization? So again, it occurs when there are invisible and informal norms and expectations that impact opportunities. Yeah, being disabled and trying to do just about anything in day-to-day life. Thank you, Abby. Could you expand more on that? Because I agree with you.
Yeah, so because there's that like norm of like, oh, being like able-bodied, that is like the normal, so you're othered if you're visibly disabled, but then if you have an invisible disability, then there is still that marginalization, because then if you try to use various tools that are like which there aren't many, but in public, if there are tools for disabled individuals, if you use them and you have an invisible disability, then you're still marginalized and judged. So
yes, exactly, where it's not spoken, right? So with this marginalization, no one's going to say, oh, you're disabled, you can't come over here, right? It's going to be more of this informal, oh, you're not the right fit for this, or oh, okay, well, we were really hoping maybe someone who's able to lift 10 pounds could go ahead and do this, where it's like, I'm not saying because you're disabled you can't participate. I'm just saying that you can't lift 10 pounds. And that's why you don't get to be part of it. So thank you. Exactly, Abby. Nikita, say more about people released from incarceration.
I guess I don't really know a lot, but just from what I've heard, that people who have been released from prison, they have difficulties integrating back into society just because of the what's placed on them, the thoughts that are placed on them. They're bad people, so it's hard to find jobs, find housing, and reintegrate back into society.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for sharing that, Nikita. Exactly right. And Emily, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to what Nikita's point, because when I was at Mendota Mental Health Institute for my first level 1 field work, one of the patients there, like, he was talking about how, like, he was in prison before he served in prison and then came to Mendota to serve the rest of his thing that he had to do, because he had both like actual crimes and things that were the not guilty by mental status. And he was talking about how, like, he was in prison and he didn't, like, their technology there is just completely different. And so he's like, I came and I had to learn how to use a phone when I got out of prison. He's like, I had to learn suddenly all these things that the whole world moved past me. And he said it was almost like being retired first and then suddenly having to go into the workforce. And he said it's just like, it's completely different. Like, it's a different world that you go into. And there's just, like, even like technology, like, you just don't know if you're in prison for that long.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, that is something that occurs often. And that also speaks to that occupational alienation and deprivation and imbalance. Honestly, our incarcerated populations go through so much. And another part of that marginalization is that there is in society, right? There is this kind of invisible and informal norm that it's kind of like, oh, well, people who are in prison, like, yeah, they kind of deserve it, right? They deserve what they get. Even though people don't say that out loud, that is an invisible or silent sentiment that permeates in society. That, well, okay, well, you're in prison, maybe you shouldn't have been there, and you would have all of your rights. And it's like, that's questionable. So yes, thank you, both Emily and Nikita, for your examples. And then the last is occupational apartheid. So apartheid occurs when people are systemically segregated and deliberately denied access to occupations, such as quality education or well-paid work, or occupational context, based on prejudice about their capacities or entitlement to benefits of culturally valued occupations. So what are some populations, or who are some populations where occupational apartheid really impacts them? So it's people who are systemically segregated and deliberately denied access to occupations. Who are some of these population groups who experience occupational apartheid? Because there's a lot. So what populations? Yep, Native Americans, absolutely. Absolutely. Our indigenous populations, systemically segregated and deliberately denied access to occupations and opportunities. Absolutely. What are some other populations? And we'll come back and talk about our indigenous populations, so you worry. As a hint, minority groups, yeah. Disabled people, LGBTQ plus people, aging population. You're actually very correct, Sheldon. This world is like hostile to babies and old people. Yeah, these are systemically, we can literally look back. There was a whole, with Black people specifically, was there not a point of segregation in our US history, right? That's apartheid. Incarcerated people being locked away and forgotten about, that's apartheid. LGBTQ people not being able to live in Florida because they're scared for their lives, that's apartheid. That's what it is. Undocumented immigrants, yes, being denied opportunities, scared, always being threatened with deportation or ICE detention. Yes, that's apartheid. Our indigenous populations, oh my God, if you actually are to go onto a reservation in the United States, reservations are just filled with unspeakable levels of poverty. And this is not Indigenous people's fault. This is where they, after a genocide occurred against so many Indigenous people in America, right? They said, okay, here's your plot of land. Here's $2 in a dream, like have fun over there. That's apartheid. Legal, yes, that is all of these things, that is occupational apartheid. And so collectively, right, these are all occupational injustices. And we just, the slide before said, well, here in OT, we believe in occupational justice. This is what we support. And over here, these are the things that we don't support, right? So what does any of this have to do with AOTA Inspire 2024? What does any of this have to do with the OT profession? What does any of this have to do with us, right? That's the question. Is that next year, AOTA Inspire 2024 is going to be held in Orlando, Florida. Traveling to the state of Florida is currently unsafe for several populations, right? LGBTQ, Latino, Black, immigrant, low SES, Muslim, DACA recipients, etc. I forgot women and children on this slide. That's on me. Women and children also. And so if OTPs and students from these backgrounds travel to Florida, they are at increased risk of systemic harm and experiences of occupational injustice, such as police harassment, brutality and incarceration, harassment in bathrooms, physical violence, sexual harassment, psychological and emotional harm, threats of deportation or ICE detention, and racial profiling. So these are all the things that could happen to us specifically, and these are all the things that are happening to people from these populations in Florida currently. So this has to do with us and AOTA because we've just talked about the foundational beliefs of OT. And one of those foundational beliefs is in occupational justice. So everything that is happening in Florida, and honestly, not just Florida, because regardless of, if you're Republican or Democrat, I really urge you to look at what's going on in the Wisconsin government because it's getting very Florida over here. So it's not just Florida, it's what this represents, what's happening in the world around us. Right? Things are getting scary for a lot of populations. And this is what could happen. And all of these are occupational injustices. So as OTs, it's our obligation to enable occupational justice. So we're going to pause right here and I will give everyone an 8-minute break and I will see you at 11 and we'll pick it back up. This has been great so far. I really appreciate you guys. All right. Okay. So what are these laws anyway? Some of these, so I should be clear and be fair. Some of these are bills and I don't know. Okay, here's another nostalgia question. Did y'all ever watch Schoolhouse Rock? Okay, if someone could just be my best friend and go ahead and get on YouTube and look up the How a Bill Becomes the Law song and then just like drop that into the chat, I think that would be really great for everyone's education. So I would love, so that's just gonna, for those of you who are not familiar with Schoolhouse Rock or who are not familiar with How a Bill Becomes a Law, we can go ahead and watch that. And that's going to be all the education that you need. You guys are doing the Lord's work. Thank you, Alyssa. Let me put a heart next to that. So yeah, so some of these are bills, some of these have officially become law. I do want to be clear about that. And I also, it should be posted. I will have to double check on the Canvas site. But there is an entire resource guide that is posted. Hold on, let me see. Oops. Okay, I will go ahead and post it. So I have a whole handout, or I guess not handout, but a whole document where you all can see the laws for yourself. So directly, actually, let me just go ahead and pull that up for you guys. Oop. Okay, sorry about that. I will also add this directly to Canva, but this leads to a Google Doc that has all of the information that I was just, that I am going to present to you all, and kind of all of the advisories that I was telling you about. With the actual bills and laws themselves, it will take you right to florida.gov, right? So because in general, I try to present all viewpoints. Oh, actually, I'm presenting my viewpoint as well. And you guys should always take anything anyone tells you with a little grain of salt and always read it for yourself. So that's what this link is. So if you want to read these bills for yourself, follow this link. It'll all be there, as well as explanation of some of these bills. Also looks at some of the unintended consequences that we will soon talk about. So this is where you can find that information for yourself, right? Because I always want you all to be informed for yourselves, because sometimes people will lie to you. That's a life lesson. All right. What am I? Okay. So something that I want to ask you all, based off of the names of these bills, right? Would you be too alarmed about anything? Are there any of these titles of these bills that are like, oh my gosh, this is scary, or this is wild, or these all seem like pretty tame? Anyone? Yeah, on the surface level, they seem very tame. Like if someone's like, oh, here's an education bill. Here's a bill about higher education. Oh, here's a bill about individual freedom. It seems like things that typical laws are about, right? So for example, SB 266, higher education. That bill, that's the bill that defunds all DEI education from public institutions, right? But you wouldn't react if someone just said, oh, this is just SB 266, it's about higher education. You wouldn't say, oh, that's the bill that's going to strip all DEI education from the state, right? So that is something to also be aware of, is a lot of bills are given very tame surface level titles that don't really cause alarm. And that's an intentional design, because if something sounded alarming, then you would probably what? You would probably dig into a little bit more. So that just, I wanted to point that out. All right, so what is a closer look? So here on the slide, I just want to break it down for you all. Exactly, they're all so vague that you would need some political literacy to know what you're seeing. Sheldon, oh my gosh, I'm literally like, exactly, oh my gosh. Everyone write what Sheldon just said down. Write that down. That's extremely important. Okay. So thank you, Sheldon. So what is up here on the screen is the top will be the name of the bill. The first bullet here is what the bill is known as colloquially. So what you hear on the news, right? So give me a thumbs up if you've heard any mention of Don't Say Gay as a bill, right? You don't have to give me your opinion on it. I just want to know, have you heard of Don't Say Gay? Okay, so we've got people who've heard of Don't Say Gay. We also have people who've not, and that's okay. But if you are someone who has heard, of the Don't Say Gay bill, whether it was on the news or someone's talking about it, this is what they're referring to. So the rest of what is on, not a Twitter fight. Oh my gosh, Kinsey, don't fight with trolls. You know what I'm saying? They just want your energy. But I understand. I'd be on Twitter fighting too. Okay, so what's on the screen is the language that is directly from the bill. So I did not write these words. I did not make these words up. This is directly from the bill, and that's also why I gave you the link, so you can read it for yourself. What is on the screen comes from the bill summary. So this is just kind of the highlights of the bill. But again, from the link that I gave you, you can go in and read the entire bill for yourself. So that is how this will run. So give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. So what is on the screen came directly from the Florida government. If you want to read more for yourself, you can follow the link that I dropped in the chat. So thumbs up if you understand that. Thumbs down if you're like, what are you saying? I don't get this. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it, because I just want to make sure we understand where I'm getting this information. Now, that being said, because some of this is complicated, I have also, and want to point out, going back to, I can see some of you are in this Google Doc, what I'm going to be speaking out loud are the interpretations of the law. And again, all of my sources are in this document, so you can see where I got the explanation and interpretation from. So I'm not just talking out of my ass. I have not decided that I now am a legal expert. No, I'm not a legal expert. I do not know how to interpret the law, but I did look up articles from people who do know how to interpret the law. So if you would like to see that and see some of these explanations, that is also here in this document. Okay, so I'm not just making shit up, I promise. And those are all of my sources that I'm citing for you. So we'll start here with Don't Say Gay. So the big thing here with Don't Say Gay, and one of the most controversial situations here is, the most controversial section of the act prohibits public schools from having classroom discussion or giving classroom instruction about sexual orientation or gender identity from kindergarten through 3rd grade. So this bill did become a law and it went on to be expanded from kindergarten through 8th grade. So from kindergarten to 8th grade, there can be no discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity. So it is definitely for K through 8. And this bill also prohibits public schools from adopting procedures or student support forms that maintain the confidentiality of a disclosure by a student, including gender identity or sexual orientation of a student from parents. So what this means is if you're a teacher, or if you're not just a teacher, if you are an adult who works at a school and a student comes to you and says, I think I might be gay. I think I might be a lesbian. I don't know. I might be non-binary. I'm trying to figure this out. Or if your student comes to you and says, hey, my pronouns are actually she, her now. Can you please use these pronouns? Then you'll have to report this to the school, which will have to report it to the parents. Now, what is something that might happen if the school is forced to report their student's gender or sexual orientation to the family? Yeah, some kids are gonna die because, right, in a perfect and just world, everyone is accepting, but that's not true. There are so many LGBTQ youth who are, and this is evidence-based sentence I'm about to say, LGBTQ youth are at higher risk for homelessness, for poverty, for violence, for drug use. And a lot of this is around the rejection of queerness. And a lot of it is that they are kicked out of their homes for being queer, right? So now you've got students who might come home, might get kicked out because they were reported. And yeah, there's a reason why some of these kids are telling their teachers and not their parents, because their teachers might be safer people. Yeah, we will get to the HIPAA part, Brady, I promise. So that is something. And it also requires public schools to bear all costs of all lawsuits filed by aggrieved parents. So that means, let's say a student does come out and they say, hey, I'm gay. And their teacher says, yay, we're happy for you. We support you. Let's say this teacher doesn't report it to the school, doesn't report this, that the parents are upset, they sue the school. The school is now responsible to pay all of the fees related, which, like, the way Florida's going, like, people are going to win these lawsuits, and then schools are also just going to be even more poor, because the general state of public education, and this is across the US, is that public schools are pretty defunded. So then on top of that, they're in charge of any financial responsibility of an upset parent being like, we're going to sue you because you didn't tell us our kid was gay, which is legal. This is all legal now, right? This is all legal. So an example that we have of, so on the next slide, again, to kind of tell you how this is going to run, is that I'm going to give some real life examples of the bill that has been applied. So our example here is a teacher who strode. Has anyone seen the movie Strange World? And then I'm going to ask for another favor for them from the community. Can someone go on YouTube and pull up the trailer to Strange World? I think it's a Disney movie. So in the movie Strange World, which I've watched, it's cute, it's funny. One of the main characters is LGBTQ plus. This movie is rated PG, and it was shown to a class of, I believe, 3rd or 4th graders. Or no, yeah, I just know they were 10 years old, and we'll see more. They all had to have permission slips to watch this movie that the parents sent, or that the teacher sent out, and all the parents signed. And this teacher is now under investigation, right? So we'll go to this next one. So her name was Jenna Barbie. So like I said, she showed a Disney movie rated PG to her 5th grade class. Her students are 10 and 11 years old. One of the main characters is gay. The student's parents signed the slip, but she said she was reported to Florida State Education Department for, quote, indoctrination before anyone had even spoken to her. So before she even knew that she was in trouble, she gets, you know, nobody from her school spoke to her. She just gets this notification from the Department of Education saying, hey, why are you trying to indoctrinate students? She's now under official investigation for possible violations of the Parental Rights in Education Act, which is also known as Don't Say Gay law. So this is something, yeah, exactly, Sheldon, seeing a child called a problem child because they wanted to say it. So yeah, this is a real world example of what this law looks like in effect, that this teacher is under investigation for indoctrination, for showing strange world, right? So this is why we're talking about advocacy and what's going on and why this is important, because this is also an occupational injustice, right? We should be able to watch children's movies in school with children without being accused of indoctrination and being under state investigation. That's terrifying, right? To not be able to watch a movie without becoming under state investigation. So that's why we're talking about this. And again, I want you guys to keep in mind as we go through all of this is that this is not just Florida, right? We can look right here in Wisconsin and see some scary stuff coming up. So it's important that we're informed. So what populations are impacted by this, by the Don't Say Gay law or by HB 1557? What are populations that could be impacted? Okay, first one's a freebie. LGBTQ plus populations, right? Who are some other populations HB 1557 can impact? Teachers, exactly. Teachers. Teachers are going to be impacted. And then who do teachers teach? Do they teach children? Yeah, they teach children. So LGBTQ plus parents, students, children, all of these populations. And again, as a side note, this PowerPoint just says LGBTQ plus, but this is just to get us started. So anything when it comes to these populations, these are not an exhaustive list. Just want to be clear about that. But yeah, exactly. So these are the populations who it's like, wait a minute. This is who this is going to impact. So then what practice areas would you say are implicated by this bill when it comes to occupational therapy? What practice areas do we think are implicated? Yes, school and peds, our school and our peds and our adolescents. So if you're a school-based OT and one of your students comes up to you, especially if you're working in a middle school, for example, because that's, you know, not to say children in elementary school cannot have gender or sexuality understanding. We just see it more come about in the middle school years with puberty and exploring and learning and about your identity more, right? And so if one of your students comes to you and says, okay, well, hi, Miss Kinsey, it's so good to see you today. Like, I just wanted to tell you, like, I think I'm gay. Well, what position does that put you in now as a school-based OT whose student has told them, well, I think I might be gay? According to the Florida law, if you were practicing in Florida, what would you have to then do next? Yeah, you'd have to disclose that information. Yeah, exactly. You would have to then, if your student comes to you and says, oh, I think I might be gay, you have to report it to the school, you have to report it to the student. And that's like, oh, wow, or not to the school, to the parents. And so that one, like back to what Brady is going to, talking about HIPAA and all those values. So you kind of have to break that confidentiality, which actually HIPAA is a little complicated when it comes to kids, because as a side note, just children, and so that's anyone under the age of 18 in the United States. From a legal standpoint, you really don't have rights in this country until you turn 18. That is why I do believe children are one of the most oppressed groups in society, but that is just an aside. Yeah, you have to now tell everyone. So this would implicate you. And again, why I'm bringing this up is there you go. This took place in Wisconsin because it's also happening in Wisconsin. So this is not necessarily a hypothetical. This could be a situation that you're put in if you're a school-based OT, whether it's in Florida or in Wisconsin. One of your students could trust you so much and tell you something very important about themselves. And now you're in this position of either I tell the school and the parents, or I don't. And maybe what could happen if you break a law? What's something that your OT license is tied to? Who gives you your license? The state, exactly. So if you break the state's law, then you could get your license revoked. You could get it suspended. You could get in trouble. So these are the connections, and these are the things where it's like, oh, this is why we advocate. This is why we're aware. This is why we talk about occupational justice and occupational injustice, because it's going to be not just an injustice to LGBTQ plus people, not just an injustice to trans people. It's going to end up being an injustice to every single last one of us. We're all impacted, right? We all are in this. And so some specific occupational injustices that are present are alienation, deprivation, and apartheid. So can someone tell me how does this relate to occupational apartheid? So go back a couple of slides, read back up on apartheid, and then tell me how this law, because this is law, this law can promote occupational apartheid. Yeah, so with alienation, kind of out of sight, out of mind, we're just going to alienate. If we make it, we're not going to say anything officially to your face, but if we make it so uncomfortable for you to exist, that's alienation. And how it relates to apartheid is this is a systemic exclusion, right? This is saying because you are a queer person, because you are a trans person, you don't get to exist in this space, right? It's creating further systemic discrimination. Exactly. Good job, all of you. All right. So the next is HB 1521. So again, this is an innocuous sounding title. It just says facility requirements based on sex. If you were just to read that, you wouldn't really think too much about it. Just like, okay, probably just means that there has to be a men and women's bathroom. Or even if I was being one drop progressive, I might say, okay, maybe it just says that there have to be bathrooms for men, women, a family bathroom, and single stall bathrooms for whoever, right? If I were to see this title, this is what I would think this law is about. So again, what is written on here is what's written in the actual bill. And I will just kind of read some of this interpretation. And again, this is one of those laws that has gone into effect. So it makes it difficult or impossible for transgender Floridians to access appropriate restrooms, domestic violence shelters, correctional institutions, or other spaces that match their gender. So this actually goes beyond just restrooms. This says that if, for example, you are a trans woman and you show up to a domestic violence shelter for women, then by Florida law, they would have to say, no, you are biologically a man. And you've got to go to, well, honestly, there aren't really that many men's domestic violence shelters. That's for a different day. So, but it would be that of, no, you can't come here. You can't get this help because you're not actually a woman. All of those things. Do I believe that sentiment? No, but that's what people believe. And so things like that, or in correctional facilities. And this is not just prisons and jails. This is also psychiatric facilities, because they also engage in types of correctional institutions, is again the same thing. If you are a trans man and you end up in jail, they're going to say, oh, we gotta put you in the women's prison. And of these situations often put trans men, women, and people at higher risk for sexual harassment, sexual assault, and for gendered violence. So under this bill, anyone whose appearance doesn't meet a stranger's expectations can be questioned about private areas of their body. And this is something that actually, it wasn't in Florida. I think it was, God, was it Florida or was it Texas? This literally just happened, and if someone finds it and puts it in the chat, thank you. But it was a little girl with a short haircut playing sports, and this older couple comes up and says, well, that one's a boy. She's a boy. She can't play. She can't do this. We want an inspection. And what do we think an inspection would consist of, right? Just think about it. We don't have to put it in the chat. But if you're asking for an inspection, you're now asking to see someone's, their sex characteristics. We're looking at genitals. We're looking at breasts. That's sexual violence. That's harassment. It's also gross and weird. And it's also legal. It's legal for someone to say, well, that person, they don't look like the gender that I think they are, and I demand an inspection. And so this is something that is also, again, applies to all of us, because it's not just people who live in Florida. This is, if you go to the state of Florida and someone says, you don't look woman enough to be in here, they're allowed to. And that's messed up. This bill also, I mean, the bill is, so like I said, it's harmful. It can be embarrassing because people are going to be harassed based off of their perceived gender. This also kind of, like I'm saying, it kind of deputizes individuals. It gives people the feeling of power to be able to they're kind of like the enforcers of the law, right? So they're allowed to come in here. There was another one that went viral just the other few weeks on, like, I think it was Twitter and TikTok, of this woman. She's like, had her camera on in the bathroom and being like, and we'll get there, Sheldon. She's in the bathroom saying like, I think you're a man, and da 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 da. And so again, let's just for 1 minute, let's even say we're not talking about trans people. Is it or is it not weird to record people in the bathroom using the bathroom, regardless of gender or sexuality? Like, can we just kind of all agree here that that is weird behavior? It's disgusting, and more seriously, it's sexual harassment. Yeah, it's weird it's weird. But see, with these laws, that's the part where it gets tricky, Brady, right? Because is it illegal anymore? Because all I have to say is, well, I thought they were trans. And that's why I'm recording. Right? So it leads to this weird slippery slope of it's not really trans people. Well, trans people are going to be harmed by this bill. Anyone who's gender nonconforming is going to be harmed by this bill. But it also leaves a lot of space for a lot of weirdos to do weird shit and get away with it. So laws work in a lot of ways. And laws like these, one, work to harm certain populations, but then they also work to give a gray area to people who are already doing weird shit, because that can always be your defense. Like, I was recording you because I thought you were trans. That's an acceptable defense in Florida. And so the last thing here is, as you were saying, or as you were asking, Sheldon, so this bill authorizes the AG, which is the Attorney General of the state of Florida, to bring enforcement actions and provides exception for individuals born with certain genetically or biochemically verifiable disorder or sex development, aka they're talking about intersex people, but they're saying if you are someone who is accused of being in a bathroom that does not match your sex assigned at birth, then the state attorney can bring charges against you. So that's who enforces these laws. The state's enforcing these laws. The police are enforcing these laws. And then just people, their everyday citizens, are enforcing these laws by videoing each other or videoing people or accusing people of being trans or not trans or in the wrong bathroom or this or that, all of that. This is how these laws get enforced. But on a legal level, yes, you could, if you're a trans person using the bathroom that matches your gender identity, you could be brought forward for criminal charges. And that's kind of scary. So, all right. So kind of looking at these in real time, like I said, the link to the article is in the chat. But we just kind of talks more about how this law has harmed and humiliated trans people, and not just trans people, but also anyone, because there's just in general this weird phenomena where there's a lot of focus on trans women, but there seems to be, like, people forget that like non-binary and trans men kind of exist. So it just kind of talks about all the implications of the populations who are kind of embarrassed by this. So the next question I have is, what populations are impacted by this bill? Who's impacted? Literally every single person. Okay, so like I have the first one, like I said, is a freebie. So LGBTQ plus people are definitely disproportionately impacted, with specific emphasis on the T, on trans people, and deeply impacted by this bill, right? We also have women being impacted by this bill, and literally everyone. Other people who are impacted are children, are like, yeah, kids, like literally everyone. And so one of the unintended consequences of this bill, right, is that there is this false belief that people can tell when a person is trans. So this has led to a lot of cis individuals, and cis, let me put that word in here. Cis just means that your gender identity assigned at birth matches your current gender identity. That's all that means. So you can be cis or trans. But anyway, so this has led to a lot of cis individuals getting harassed by people attempting to kick them out of their bathroom. So a lot of, like, for example, because a lot of these incidences do occur in women's bathrooms, but this is not to say that trans men and non-binary people are not harmed in men's bathrooms. But the most recent examples that I have seen either in the news or in real time is maybe there's a woman with a short haircut in the bathroom, and people start, oh, you're trans, get out of here. And it's cis women being like, no, I'm a woman, why are you trying to kick me out? So it just leads to these false accusations. And so now nobody's comfortable in the bathroom, right? Because there's a group of people trying to find trans people. So areas implicated by this bill, like I said, are mental health practice, school-based practice, and adult and geriatric practice. And that's because these laws apply to all facilities that receive state funding. If you receive state funding and you're a facility, then this means you. So our mental health facilities, school-based, because our public schools are publicly funded, and then adult and geriatric practice, because SNFs and things like that are also all state funded. And then these are the occupational injustices present. Okay, we'll do, give me a second. Okay, so this one, oh Lord. Okay, so this is treatments for sex reassignment. And so the big thing you need to know about SB 254 is that this removes trans children from their homes if their parents provide them access to gender affirming care. So it is essentially state sanctioned kidnapping. So if your child comes home and says, I'm actually a girl, or I'm non-binary, actually I'm a boy, mom, like I'm he, him, and you say, you know what, honey, I love you so much, and I want to make sure that you get access to the mental health care that you need. I want to make sure that you have access to a support group that you might need. I want to make sure you have the doctors that you need so we can do this in a safe and happy and healthy way because I love you, right? So the parent loves their child and the parent says, this is a choice that I've made to support my child because I understand that their gender identity isn't a choice, right? So the parent says that, and then the state can say, actually, not so fast. Not so fast. We don't agree with what you're doing. We don't agree with your child. We don't agree with you providing care to them. In the official press release, DeSantis, I think, refers to any type of gender affirming treatment for children as mutilation. So because that is the position of the state, then the state has the right to come remove your child from the home. So I don't know how many of you are parents. I know some of you are, and all of us, right, at some point have been children. So imagine one day, let's say you came home and you said, yo, mom, my favorite color is purple. And I want to paint my room purple. Like, dad, I want to paint my room purple. And you're like, okay, let's go get this paint. And the state had said, actually, purple is illegal. We're taking your child from the home, right? That's wild. And that's exactly what's happening with trans children in terms of them getting love and care from their family. So just imagine, because your parents loved you, you get removed from your home. So that's what's going on. It also bans gender affirming medical care such as puberty blockers or hormone therapy for transgender youth, and also enacts obstacles for adults to access treatment. So this also blocks adults for treatment, for receiving any gender affirming treatment. It also makes it illegal. It makes it illegal for any care providers to provide any gender affirming care. So this is important because this really implicates all of us. So again, any type of gender affirming care. And we'll see this a lot in school-based OT and peds and adolescent psych and psych, is that we often see our patients and our clients, you know, coming to terms with their gender identity and how they want to present themselves and who they really are. And if you as an OT are there affirming their choices, if you're helping, let's say you have a client who their goal is to find out where they can go for hormone therapy, or maybe their goal is to find a support group of gender nonconforming youth, right? That's a more realistic one, right? So you're in, whether it's psych in the schools or in a hospital or something like that, you're working with a teenager who says, you know, I'm gender nonconforming. I've been really having a tough time. This is what, you know, is impacting my mental health. I'm here with a diagnosis of, you know, depression and anxiety. And something that I think can help me is finding a support group for teenagers like me. That is something that would absolutely happen in a psych setting or in a peds or in an adolescent setting. And then it would be very appropriate as the OT to say, okay, if you would like to find a support group, let's make our OT plan to find you a support group. Well, now, if you do that, what have you just provided to this hypothetical teenager? If you say, yes, I will help you find a support group that you can go to, what have you just provided them with? Yeah, you just gave them gender affirming care. And gender affirming care is what? Illegal in this circumstance. And so again, it implicates us. It implicates these practice areas. It implicates everyone, because now, okay, we're doing things that are technically illegal. And it's something where if you're not even aware of the law, you could accidentally do, right? You could not even accidentally, you could not know that you're even breaking the law until next thing you know, you've got a notice, right, from your licensure board saying, yo, when you helped Christina find that group for a gender nonconforming youth, like you actually provided gender affirming care, you're under investigation. Those are the things that can happen. This bill also, I don't think I talked about it as, okay. Oh yes, this bill also defunds trans inclusive public health care. And so that is just why I wrote in there the intersections with socioeconomic status and race, just because it takes away gender affirming care for people who rely on public insurances. And so we see people from low SES background and people from racial minority backgrounds who rely on public insurance, who are also LGBTQ plus people being denied this care. So I also I guess I should also have put like people in rural areas as well. All right, so we're gonna pause here and I will see everyone back at 11. Well, what time is this class over? This class is over at 12:20. I'll see you guys back at 11:50. Let's just take a break because I'm tired of my own voice. I'll see you back in 5 minutes.